whether you agree or not. This video uh, and Destiny, the whole franchise, it always has been about faith. It's a driving factor in the Final Shapes campaign. It's it's something that it's come into question in Beyond Light. Ever since Destiny 2 started, we've been questioning our role as guardians, our faith as guardians. Gaul invades the tower. Gaul invades the last city and captures the Traveler. And everyone's questioning, why did the Traveler just let that happen? Why did it do that? And then it awakens. Everything happens. Forsaken happens. Cade dies. We call into question, like, why did Cade have to die? And then we start questioning in Beyond Light our trust in the light, our trust in darkness. Like, do we think that it is worth dedicating all this time to a silent god? Are we going to devote ourselves completely to darkness? It's all about faith. And then Witch Queen happens. That faith is completely shattered by the Traveler giving the Hive the light. Yeah, lore-wise, they were chosen before us, and I guess Savathun's exorcism is the catalyst to them once again being chosen. But Ghost didn't exist back then, I don't think it's clear. Because, like, technically, the Fallen were chosen. And we haven't seen any Fallen Guardians. Any Elixni. We haven't seen any of those. We haven't seen... Well, in the lore, we technically have. Because the Ammonite were able to use... Right? Was it the Ammonite? They were able to use the light, but they didn't have ghosts, so they couldn't resurrect, at least to my knowledge. I haven't played a game that calls faith into question this radically. And if you just play Final Shape again and you pay attention to Zavala's story, it's all about a man who has completely lost his faith in the Traveler. Because his story is not resolute. It's not fixed, his relationship with Ikora is fixed. But he still has this hole in his heart, And it's eating away at him to a certain extent. He's in an opposite place compared to the Dark Future timeline, the Dark Future lore book, where he finds himself lightless, but in the Dark Future, he doesn't really have that much faith in the Traveler. He becomes like a proto-speaker, forces the light back in. He's not willing to accept stasis even that far into the future. The Great Machine and its lies. 10 years, bro. 10 years we fought for the light. Done more than anyone has ever done in the history of Destiny. But it stays silent. Only speaking when it needs help. 2017. The Traveler gives us a vision to get back our light. 2022. It gave our enemies the light. I don't care if the Traveler chose them before us. After everything the Hive did, it allowed it to happen. Traveler could have said no at any moment. You're telling me the Traveler couldn't recall those ghosts? Like he did for Rolk? 2023, it stayed silent. It stayed still, letting the witness carve a path into it. 2024, it guides us through the labyrinth of the Pale Heart. Gives us weapons and visions to aid it. But it's only helping itself in that way. You know? Like, I guess the whole universe is at stake, but think about it. The Traveler's only defending itself. And yet, the Guardian who fought bravely in fights that nobody could imagine taking on, like, we fought Crota, we fought Oryx, we pushed back the Shadow Legion, we destroyed the Black Heart twice now, and prevented its resurrection twice, and yet the Traveler stays silent. You know, and at the end of Final Shape, of course, it continues to stay silent. After everything we've been through, 10 years, it couldn't do us one favor and brought back our ghost. Not once. Traveler's not that great. Turns a blind eye to pain, suffering, and injustice to the whole universe. According to the visions of the Traveler, it might not be able to understand reality, which I think is just an excuse, you know?
I can feel the Traveler's presence radiating from this object. Memories and experiences, emotions and ideas blooming in my mind. I see so many cities, so many peoples basking in my light. They study me, and in their discoveries they come to understand the universe. I am a blueprint for them to follow, a canvas upon which the mysteries of the universe are written. These little gardeners are such careful stewards of fragility, but then they begin kneeling. They plead, beg, demand. I do not know what to do. There is confusion, helplessness, guilt. There's nothing more.
Does this mean that the great machine does not wish to be worshipped?
I don't know if I'd interpret it that way. It may be more a lack of frame of reference. It doesn't understand reverence or worship. But that also doesn't mean it can't learn. But that it's still trying to understand us. Or maybe it never will. Does that invalidate faith?
I do not know. It provides a question. And I suppose it is on me to ponder the answer. For the truest answers lie within ourselves.
They've terraformed worlds, created life, created the ghosts, revived us. And when we served our purpose, it leaves us to die. Like, yeah, the Guardian Creed. You know, bravery, sacrifice, death. But still, it's like it was totally capable of reviving our ghost, and it didn't do it. It cost us Cade again. I know Cade chose that, but doesn't change the fact that it was something that he did because the Traveler forced his hand. Arguably, the Traveler has been with us every step of the way. Even though the collectible Traveler impressions are up for interpretation, they kind of pretty much confirm that the ghosts are just fragments of the Traveler's being. Like, aspects of it split into millions of pieces. Probably billions. Which, now that I mention it, actually brings up an interesting parallel between the Traveler and the Witness. The Witness being a collective brought together as one in darkness, you know? And the Traveler being one divided into a collective. Let's be honest, despite everything, the Traveler only ever spoke when it benefited the traveler, you know? And it stayed silent pretty much any time when it was safe. Like that lore tab where Roka's convincing the ghost of giving them their power, but then presumably it is the traveler that speaks through it and says something like, adversary, this one is not for you. Another instance where the traveler really holds its own interest and no one else's. You know, I just think of something interesting where, like, Final Shape is the culmination of the Light vs. Dark saga. Yeah, I can't help but feel like all it did was turn me against the traveler, you know? Like, it's been 10 years, right? And you're telling me the traveler doesn't have the power to push anyone back out? I mean, like, it blew up Gaul, it shot out to the witness, like, it I know it was an act of desperation, but I'm sure it's enough power to cleanse itself from Hive and Taken. And yet it sticks with it, you know? I don't have an actual resolution about this. It's just that the fact is that I no longer trust the Traveler as a benevolent figure in Destiny's universe. It doesn't make any sense to me now. I think Zavala's arc is something that really resonates with me in this expansion, because by the end of the expansion, he doesn't believe in the Traveler, just like how I'm saying. Because he's just constantly mentioning about how it's a silent god, you know, it's not almighty, it's not all powerful. I don't know. This almost makes me feel like it's like I'm seeing Superman through the Zack Snyder lens, you know? It's kind of like this atheistic view, I guess. But it's because, like, you know what it is, right? You know what the Traveler is. But at the same time, you see it, and you see how it's acted throughout the narrative, and you just can't help but think, like, it wasn't there for us. It wasn't there to help, despite a decade of us doing stuff for it. But yeah, it's clear that Destiny's has always been about faith. Really don't know what else to say. Like, I feel like I have to talk about this with somebody else. So, like, feel free to add on to it or comment or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to engagement farm. I'm just genuinely curious what other people might think about this, because in this whole saga, I've sort of been like yeah, obviously the Traveler's the good guy, but now I'm just thinking where it's like, you know, is it? Do you want that to be in control? Because now it's got both light and dark. You know, we don't know to what extent that's gonna change everything. Because, like, we know that the veil is all darkness, and the Traveler used to be all light, but now it's both light and dark. So where does that leave the veil? Because if you remember at the end of Lightfall, Ghost is like, it feels like the Traveler, and you know, it's kind of weird where that leaves it, because what does that mean, right? So there's still a lot to explore there, because, like, yeah, I guess we know what the veil is now, but we don't know what it is, you know? Like, cosmically, is that like a counter Traveler? Is that like an anti-Traveler? And is it an enemy to the Traveler? Like, the way it was used to in a way that hurt the Traveler. Um, but can it be communed with? Can it be talked with? Or is it just a tool? Like a paracausal tool? I don't understand it. I mean, it's got the similar color to Prismatic. So maybe it could be related to that. But it's not clear whether it's a good thing or not. But that's about it. Okay, so I've been thinking about this for the past few weeks. The dread and the relationship to disciples. Like, we know that the subjugators, like, the omen and the subjugator, they're imprints of Roke. They're basically Roke clones. And then the Tormentor, we know that Tormentors are like Nezarec imprints. They share the same anatomy. The major differences in the sizes that they come in, and if you look at the Luminality strike, the Tormentor boss in that strike is basically wearing a Tormentor version of Nezarec's Sin. Like, he straight up has an exotic on. So we already know the subjugators and the tormentors, they're just clones of existing disciples. So what does that say about the rest of them? We already know that is it Otsot? I think Otsot is the one we're expecting to be the next antagonist from the Scions. So if we were to go with like who could possibly be a representative for the attendants, it would probably be that one, because we know that the attendants and whatever the other one is called, the attendant and weaver is right there. The attendant and weaver, they're both scions, like mutant scions. So yeah, that's probably what they are. But like, where does that leave the husk and the grim? I was almost expecting to see like a giant grim in the raid, because I was like, well, if the tormentors are copies of Nezarec and the subjugators are a copy of Roke, then there must be something like a giant grim, like, sure, we do know that there are more disciples. We know because there's lore about there's another disciple that he's unnamed, but it looks like he's against, no, well, no, not against, it's just that he has some choice words that the witness doesn't like, because he's like, oh, well, what about the final shape? Why is it so different? Why do you allow us to have so many different interpretations of it when you clearly have a different version from the rest of us? So, like, I don't know, there's like different disciples that could be the connection to it, and having someone that's like a sniveling, like, yeah, I don't agree with the plan, guy, kind of makes sense for it to be like something like a hobgoblin, like, I don't mean like the Vex hobgoblin, I mean like, in mythology, like this hunched over sniveling creature that sounds like the Grim, We know that when they first appear, the Grim are referred to as remnants of a conquered civilization, which, makes sense. That's most likely it. Because, like, the Scion, they have Scions because they have, like, those cloning things. Callus and his Legion, they were already doing the cloning stuff. Like, most of the Shadow Legion is supposed to be clones, pretty sure. So they're not even real Cabal. That's a whole other subject. But yeah, but even if there might be a bigger Grim, we can still see that with both the Grim and the Husk, there's like that they're like cut up still. Well, not so much with the, well, I guess here and around the arms and the different structures with the head and stuff. They still do look like they were like cut up in the way the Witness does with the chimeric fusion. That they just kind of cut away weaknesses and they turn them into something else. Oh look, we can see it in the leg here too. Yeah, so they're like all segmented to be that perfect force. Now I have a theory about some of this stuff, because if we look at the Grim, it's also like a combined thing. So my theory is that just like the Tormentors, I don't think they're exactly clones of Nezarec. I think it's that they're other things that they grabbed and just sort of twisted and mutilated until they became something like Nezarec. You know, if you look at some of the stuff about Nezarec, we hear about chimeric fusion. You know, how the Witness chops stuff up and makes them into something new, something deadly. You know, going into the I guess the Hive's idea of sword logic, you know, where it's just cutting away imperfections until they're like the perfect weapon. Now, the Husk are really interesting because the Husk, right? If we're gonna go by my theory that these guys are chimerically fused, I have an idea that if we look at the anatomy of a Husk, it looks kind of like a Scorn, you know? Like, really look at it. Like, compared to a Scorn, they move in a similar way to how they move similar to Chieftains, they move similar to the Ravager. It kind of makes sense that they might be some sort of like cutaway thing. And if you look at the proportions, they're really similar too. And if we go back, let's go back all the way to Witch Queen. If we go back to Vow of the Disciple, like in Witch Queen, over 2 years ago, we can kind of see like a similarity between the Caretaker and the Husk. Just further connecting them in terms of like anatomy, right? Where the Scorn were being experimented on in Sabathur's throne world in the pyramid. And, you know, we see them being injected with the worms and stuff and trying to create like something crazy. And that's the result of the Caretaker, which, by the way, is like hooded and covered in all those wraps. And if we go back to the Husk, they kind of have a similar hood and wrappings. They have that draping cloth around the leg. Like, they both release a projectile of pyramid design. If we look back at the worms in the pyramid in Witch Queen, like, we can see all those cut up worms and stuff, and how they're, like, if we compare, like, kind of like the size and structure of that pyramid worm creature thing, and where a hive worm usually resides, you know, it kind of makes sense that maybe the Husk is like the end of that experiment of how the Scorn could possibly transition to something else. Compare it to the worm. It's got like similar spikes and stuff. The Caretaker being a result of those experiments, but what if the Husk is the final result of that experiment? First time we see those spiraling pyramid explosives is in Vow. So maybe those slice up worms are the Husk parasite thing. the thing that swirls around inside them, and size-wise it makes sense. The husk movement is quite similar to that of a fallen captain or scorned chieftain. They even do like that spinning toss where they throw like a flame at the player. If they're like the Grimm and are just like another species, which would make sense, but that could be just another explanation. So my question is, can we assume the number of disciples mirror that of the Dread? Are there 2 or 3 more disciples we haven't seen yet? And if the Grimm have their own disciple, could it be some giant bat monster thing? That'd be freaking cool. You know, it's interesting, is all. The correlation between Dread and disciple. But yeah. I'm just kind of rambling on about this because it's interesting and I haven't seen anyone talk about it. I like the idea that they could have the nuance of being these twisted, altered versions of enemies we already know. Because that's what we see with the Scions, you know? Is it so far-fetched to think that maybe the Husk or Grimm could be some kind of fused species that we haven't seen? And do they have a disciple representative? There's just a lot to explore with this concept. But thanks for watching, thanks for listening, I guess. Yeah, I didn't plan on making more Destiny videos, but I really am enjoying it. Recording this one early because I got stuff to do today. You know, today I'm just posing a question. Io and Mercury are still MIA. You know, and nobody's talking about it. We already got rid of the witness. But do we know how to get those plants back? Because we don't know how they moved these plants in the first place. Not truly. We don't understand that process. We saw in Nezarec's raid the Explicator of Worlds that, you know, they were moving stuff around. But were we really moving stuff around in real space, or was that just a raid mechanic? Like, how much did that actually affect the world around us, the universe around us? Because we know that in Witch Queen, Savathun says, soon the power to move worlds would be yours, you know? That whole insight stuff. She says the power of the witness. But we killed the witness. It goes back to my earlier statement where it's like, were we actually doing anything inside the pyramid during Explicator of World? We would move stuff around, but like, were these just like a diorama? Or was it actually moving objects in real space? Because if it was moving objects in real space, then that means we could probably already have that power. But assuming it is not reliant on the pyramids and completely reliant on an amount of knowledge from the witness, like, we might have lost it. We might have lost it. Because it kind of does feel like we kind of missed the chance to do that. It does feel like that in the story. Unless that's like what Echoes is all about. Unless some random disciple we didn't know about is able to do this. Or maybe even the Winnower. Because, you know, we all know he's coming in the story now. He's most likely able to do everything the Witness can and probably more. Because, you know, it's basically fighting like the universe itself. The Winnower. Well, not really the co-creator of the universe. Like half the universe. That's like the equal amount of fighting half the universe. Which is still a lot. It's likely that the Echoes could be a key, since they are like a crystallization of the Witness's memories, as well as the clashing of dark powers with the light. Maybe those crystallized fragments could show the way. On the other hand, narratively, it feels like these plants might have been forgotten. I just actually wouldn't be surprised if everything I say in this video is just not ever gonna happen. It's kind of got that feeling, unless their plan is to save all this for Destiny 3, since it is such a major power set Because, like, if our Guardian gets to move planets, like, come on. That's, like, super OP. Like, I don't see how we're gonna be able to go any higher than that. Because other than that, it seems super important. And I don't know how much control over these things Ziva or Wrath could have. But at current, she's like the biggest threat of darkness, in quotations, that's left in the universe. We know that Oryx spoke with the darkness. So, who knows, maybe Zivu can do that. Maybe she will do that. I don't know if she's ever done that in the lore. You can correct me if she has. But it feels like we're gonna be moving on from these things. Like, I guess the echoes would only affect things that are in real space, because they were released into our universe, not any other place that the Witness might have pulled our worlds to. Io and Mercury are probably far away from anything that could be affected by it, because we know the Dreadnought's coming back. The Dreadnought is Oryx's throne world, kind of how Oryx was able to summon Zivu back through an act of war, and he was able to summon Savathun back with an act of deception. Is it far-fetched to say that maybe if the Hive are exploring something of this magnitude, like the echoes of something with this amount of knowledge, could it be some kind of tribute that is enough to get to Oryx? You know what I mean? Because, like, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, ever since they brought Zivu into the picture, and they spoke about all this stuff about, like, oh yeah, my brother's dead. And they keep on teasing, like, a possible return to Oryx. They brought back King's Fall with the new lore tabs and stuff. And then they brought back Titan. And we got the Season of the Deep dungeon, which he's just in, he's just in there, and he's, not rotting, but he's growing. That's crazy. There's a lore tab where it says that he's, like, getting bigger. I've been thinking about, like, how could you summon back Oryx? Could this be something that could happen because as we know, those echoes contain knowledge and memories from the Witness, and Oryx was basically like the god of navigation or something. I don't know. So would something like the Echo be enough to conjure him back like that? I think it could be possible, but it is kind of a stretch to say that could happen. But getting back on the topic, we're still missing 2 whole planets. That's still crazy. Because what's going on? How messed up are those planets that the Witness only ever gave back Mars and Titan? It's up to debate who gave the planet back with Mars. Because Savathun is like, I brought back Mars, but also, did she? I'm not sure on that. It's still super debatable on that, whether she can actually move planets or not. She might be able to, because she was scheming to take the Traveler. And, it's not planet size, it's far from being moon size. But that is still a paracausal force. And I assume the Traveler won't be moved unless it wants to be moved. Like the pyramids. Like, we know that the Witness was, basically pulling these worlds apart, like, stretching them and stuff to look for something, to look for answers. We know the Witness pulled these worlds apart looking for the Veil and objects of interest. And we know that Io is like brimming with light. Hence the attraction the Taken already have towards it. Because like Io is like pretty significant. We got the Pyramidion. We have one of the cradles of the Traveler. But what about Mercury and the Vex there? Is the Infinite Forest even still there after all this? It's definitely interesting that both planets that are still missing contain stations that are important to the Vex. We know that life isn't paused on these worlds when they were taken, because Sloane lived that time there with Asa. So we know that Brother Vance is probably not doing okay right now at all. He's probably doing worse than Sloane is. It's just interesting to me that both planets that are missing are both contain important Vex stations. Like, who has them? Does some random disciple have them? We know the Witness doesn't have them anymore because the Witness is... Could we ever see these planets come back? Like, or is this just a Dreaming City situation? For gameplay reasons, it's not gonna happen. Because Io is narratively important for so many reasons. The attraction of the Taken, because beneath the surface there's a ton of light under it, you know? The Tree of Silver Wings, the Cabal facilities, the Pyramidion, and the Cradle of Io. So it's like there's a lot of points of interest. And Mercury has the Infinite Forest, the Sundial, and the Corridors of Time. We know that the Witness was looking for something on Titan and Mars, which is why it all got pulled back, because they like threw them out and they were done with it. You know, they don't care anymore. Are Mercury and Io just permanently gone, or are they so important? So are Mercury and Io so important to the Witness that they remain missing? We know the Witness is dead. So could there be a disciple watching over him? Could the Winnower itself be the one that has him in holding? We don't exactly know what the Winnower truly wants. He seems to be very entertained by our own existence and how we've battled for so long. The festering civilizations of the universe that gather for war. So I don't know. He seems super entertained by the things we do. I don't think he cares if we have Io and Mercury. So is this related to a new subclass we could be getting? Because Final Shape has a lot of talk about possible subclasses we could get in the future. There's mention of the nightmare powers from Nezarec that we could eventually control and use. That'd be crazy. Dragon the EDZ and it's like, you're gonna have a nightmare today. Like, you know, just send a phantom at him and traumatize him for life. That's insane. But there's also the power of resonance. Resonance feels like it's more likely to be the one to come because there are so many enemies we see that are using it. Because we see the Dread using it, the Shadow Legion, they have those pyramid shield things. So it's like there's more hope for that kind of stuff. But the nightmare power is something that is talked about in Final Shape. So who knows? We're probably gonna get that. But that's a whole other topic basically. I bring this up even though it's off topic because they could be the answer in moving those planets back. But it could be involved with Frontiers, you know, Destiny Frontiers. These two planets could be part of the... Because when they say Frontiers, they could be meaning a lot of things. We know Drifter talks about the Frontier, things he's seen, Light Suppressing Beast, sounds like the Dread, you know, Tormentors, things that killed his crew. We could be looking for the power to move worlds. Maybe that's what's taking us to the Frontier. Looking for the power to move worlds to get Mercury and Io back. And maybe even prevent this from happening again. The idea of Frontiers could also just be like the space where Mara explored, because Mara has gone outside of the solar system in recent history and destroyed a pyramid ship. So there could be something over there, out in the beyond. So the disappearance of Io and Mercury could still be related to the idea of Destiny Frontiers then. Could these two planets be part of the frontiers we could be exploring? What's even gonna happen with those planets anyway? But in the end, this video is pure speculation, but it is very true that the disappearance of these planets and possible return are very much narratively important and hold stakes in the Destiny universe. You can share your ideas in the comments. And before we go, I gotta say thanks to people who just subscribed to the channel. I didn't expect anyone to actually watch these Destiny videos. I very much appreciate it. I'm not monetized, so I'm doing this purely out of the love for the lore of Destiny. I'm a 3D artist by trade, so Destiny was the last thing I expected to get attention from. You guys have officially watched my Destiny videos more than people have played my game. So, you've officially helped surpass my previous biggest project. So, I thank you guys for that. And see you in the next one. We just got Prismatic this year, right? Which is the first and maybe even only light and dark subclass we'll ever get. It's freaking awesome. Like, I'm running Strand Super with the Strand, the Needle, and Arc Grenades, so I can use Getaway Artist, and then I also have that aspect with Devour and Helion when I'm in PvE. So I can have my Arc Buddy with Getaway Artist and the little fire dude with the Helion. And it's freaking awesome. In PvE, in PvP, I mean, I use Bleak Watcher and Helion. So I have 3 elemental buddies with me when I go into the PvP. That's freaking cool. Like, right now we're kind of out of balance with the dark and light subclasses. We have 3 light subclasses and 2 darkness subclasses. And we only have 2 darkness supers per class. So, you know, we only have 2 darkness for a Titan, 2 for Warlock, and 2 for Hunter. But we have a ton more in the light subclasses for each class. You know, with Void, we have a ton of supers, different variants of each one too. So, like, I'm here to talk about that imbalance. Because we keep getting teased about what the next power could be. It feels like there's more, and when I look at the stuff that they're teasing, and all the darkness abilities we've seen across the past 10 years, like the first time we actually got to use darkness powers and yes, we did get to use them back then, because of the raid and some of the weapons and armor we got. We got to use take and stuff, and we've only grown that arsenal of different darkness abilities since then. Here's what I think about it. Much like the phrase, the greater the light, the greater the shadow, it kind of seems like that might be the case. Our light may be so bright that we may be creating more darkness. That's maybe being reflected in all the powers that we might be able to get. So here are some powers derived from the darkness. As I mentioned already before, taking, you know, probably the most popular one, and I think the most cool looking one. It's the first true power of darkness we were introduced to, is the ability to move between the ascendant planes and returning transformed. You know, Oryx does this with his claws to take his enemies and transform them into his own weapons. You know, if we read the Grimoire cards, he says stuff like, this is the Taken Acolyte Grimoire card. You are an acolyte, half-grown backbone of the hive, cunning and ambitious, and crushed beneath your mighty rulers. You have been taken. Stop praying. Give up your recitations. Your faith is fulfilled. You will be strong now. What is your creed? What do you believe? That you may, with caution and care, survive to grow in tribute? that you may one day lead a centuries-long crusade, but you are lightly armed and craven. You hide behind cover and wish for greatness. Glory escapes you. You need help. There is a knife for you. It is shaped like, not alone. Take up the knife. Call on its company. Take your new shape. So, as you can see, they're being carved into something greater, using that knife. You can see that knife analogy being made with most of the Hive pantheon, and now even the Witness, who calls himself the first knife that the Winnower wielded. Which kind of makes me think that maybe all these Grimoire cards of all the Taken are maybe the Winnower itself speaking to each enemy. When he says, there is a knife for you, it is shaped like no more fear, it is in brackets. So it's giving us a little bit of context and like what they might be talking about. It kind of reflects programming in that way, we have to like close brackets, use parentheses and stuff like that to declare values. And the Winnower kind of fits the bill of someone that could like reprogram the universe. So like taking is kind of like reprogramming and repurposing beings into a greater weapon. So far in game, we've only seen 2 beings to have the ability to create Taken, or at least send them to a place where they will become Taken. Oryx and the Witness are the only 2 beings to be able to do that. But we have seen characters like Savathun, Malak, Xivu Wrath, Nokris, Riven of a Thousand Voices, as well as some other Ahamkara, and Disciples of the Witness, who have been able to take control of Taken forces. So they're not creating Taken or sending them anywhere to be made, they're just controlling the forces that already exist. There is a lore tab in which Marasov experiments with controlling units. I think that's from last year. I think. And there's like this Taken that's just walking around the Dreaming City, and she controls it. Control of the Taken is done via a strong will from one with usually paracausal strength. However, there are some partially Taken beings like Riven, Quoria, and Malak who have been giving a certain amount of free will that allow them to take a degree of control of their own actions. Quoria, being a powerful Vex mind, even displayed the ability to control and influence non-Taken Vex units. So it looks like that this Taken power kind of is a vulnerability to the Vex, as they're really reliant on a network structure of being. So Quoria, being a corrupted network, influences them to do things in different ways. We know that the Vex are vulnerable to Taken, like back in the Taken King when they recalled us back to the Vault of Glass to seal a Taken breach. There are also a number of times we've already used Taken power. In Destiny 1, we harvest Oryx's heart to create the Touch of Malice. We also get the Black Spindle, aka the Taken version of the Black Hammer, which then returned in Destiny 2 as the Whisper of the Worm. And on top of that, we also have some legendary weapons too. So we have the Season of the Deep weapons, which are Taken versions of the Reckoning weapons, and the weapons introduced in the Taken Spring update, such as Stolen Will and Dreadfang, when we return to the Prison of Elders and face off Malak, as well as some Taken armor sets in Destiny 1 that are acquired through Eververse. Even though the Grimoire cards explain how the Techians were experimenting with Taken energies to create and imbue them with power. Other instances in which we use the Taken energies for power are times like in the Taken King raid, and in most recent history in Lightfall, and in most recent history in Final Shape, when we are torn between realities, where we're between real space and the Ascendant Plane. We take on a Taken appearance when we are torn between realities, and we're able to interact with certain Taken energies when we're in this state. Same as when we use the Taken power relics, which function as a semi-automatic energy blast that can also be burst of Taken energies, similar to that of the Darkness Blast from the Taken captains. For the most recent example of using those relics, we can look at the Liminality Strike when we use the Taken energies to power up the Ahamkara skulls. Next up, the power of nightmares, first introduced in Shadowkeep, power that comes from the mind, harnessing fears and conjuring visions of things we've either faced in the past or are afraid to face in the future. After we conquered our fears in Shadowkeep, we've seemed to have contained them on the moon, save for a few lost sectors across the system. When Callus returned to the solar system with the Leviathan, he parked it right over the moon, and it was infested with egregore, using egregore to establish a link with the pyramid and expand the nightmares into his own territory. At first I thought it could be an attempt to gain these powers, but seeing as in Lightfall he doesn't seem to have any nightmare-based powers, he may not have such abilities. Also in Lightfall we finally meet Nezarec, brought into the story a few months prior in the Season of the Plunder, where we uncover the relics of Nezarec, which are seemingly radioactive. Nezarec feeds on fear, as he states in the beginning of the boss fight, and since he is tied to our mind and our fears, he's seemingly cosmically immortal, since his power continues to linger across the solar system. Even if you go back to the Thrillodrome using Nezarec's helmet and Nezarec's whisper, he'll chuckle, laugh. You'll hear whispers from him. Eris also wields the nightmares in the Season of the Haunted, when we are bound in the ritual, and using the harvested nightmares combined with our light, we manifest the relics that season to cut down the nightmares. On top of that, Micah 10 brings it up that we could be wielding that power soon enough. In the post-campaign missions, well, not really post-campaign, because it's right before the raid / excision, when you replay the mission from Shadowkeep, Micah 10 talks about it and says that maybe perhaps it's a power that we could learn to wield one day. And I'm really excited for that, because it really does seem like that might be the power we'll unlock first. Next up, Resonance. We're first introduced to Resonance in an official capacity with Rolf, who was the first enemy to present us with the power. A power seemingly coming from pyramid technology and or an understanding of dark powers that come from the Witness. We've seen multiple forms of these powers, from Beyond Light introducing those shielded barriers using pyramid technology, the beams of pyramid geometry first seen in Vow of the Disciple, to the pyramid weapons introduced in Lightfall and Final Shape, such as the portable shield generator that we see the Shadow Legion use, the radial mast, and the floating turrets that typically manifest around the Dread. Most Dread units also sport pyramid tech weapons. That's already 3 powers derived from darkness, and I haven't even talked about Stasis, which we began wielding in Beyond Light, and Eris seemingly discovered at the end of Shadowkeep. In Strand, which we discovered in Lightfall, and upon landing on Neomuna, we already see enemies having overshields powered by Strand. This year we now see enemies wielding Strand and Stasis in the Dread units. Stasis has also been used by the Taken and Scorn, but curiously enough, Hive units do not wield either one. Speaking of the Hive, Hive magic. It's interesting how the Hive have remained with their own powers, sinister but not really true darkness powers. I mean, they call from the deep to use their magics, but we can't really call them dark powers. If you played Destiny 1 for as long as I have, like many, you probably assume that poison or hive magic would eventually become a subclass. I mean, it's already a damage type in the game. We've had weapons that utilize it since Destiny 1. Thorn, Osteostriga, Necrotic Grips. In the case of Necrotic Grips, we know it involves the use of the K1 artifact, and how the wraps on the arms are actually the ripped skin from the arms of the K1 research team. Hive magic is still compatible with the light, using Void, Solar, and Arc crystals to power different aspects of it. Siva, Wrath, and Eris seem to have the greatest feats of strength when it comes to the use of Hive magics. Eris using the tithes from the Guardians, and Sarathun's own reservoir of tithe energy to kick Xivu out of her own throne world. And Xivu Arath's feat of strength would be opening her Dracula-looking cape to let loose her armies on Tora Battle. So, also, I say Dracula because that artwork is a reference to Dracula artwork in which Dracula has his cape open across a city, sort of like shrouding the city in darkness. Deep sight. Deep sight is also seemingly linked to resonance, as it's basically the ability to peer into the past, may it be memories or physical change in space, or like the relic on Mars, recalling an object to take shape. It can also be utilized to unlock memories, like when Savathun traumatized Crow, or when the Guardian traumatized Savathun back, because what the hell? Can't go around doing that to people. Asa also uses the Egregore coral in Season of the Deep to communicate with us through Sloane. The Egregore connection links this power to the nightmares as well, because as we saw in Season of the Haunted, Egregore is also used for deep sight and the nightmares, giving resonance, nightmares, and strand common ground, as they're all powers based in the mind. Osiris explains this in one of the cutscenes for Lightfall during the campaign. And before we finish, I'd like to mention one more thing. The ability to move planets is apparently linked to the power of taking. However, Savathun was able to enact this on the Traveler using her thread weavers. So, it's not exactly the same, but it looks like solid enough evidence that the power to move worlds is not a taken ability, but rather a whole other thing. Being involved with things like the thread weavers may also link at the strand. However, it doesn't use... In the Trader's Vessel lore tab, we read about a fight between Savathun and Nezarec, in which it kind of sounds like Savathun uses strand. The description of the powers she's using sound very familiar to that of strand. I don't think this is confirmed or not. I think, however, it does make sense if Savathun took the veil from Nezarec and hid it away. So maybe she might have tapped into it while in the presence of the veil, before the veil ended up in the Amuna, of course. The veil is also a pathway to a linking consciousness, the river of souls and threads that bind us all together. It's how the witness was binded together into one being, and it's how the Neomuni communed in the Cloud Arc. The power to move worlds would also be an interesting way of introducing... The power to move worlds also seems like an interesting way to introduce a new destination, because Hive War Moons are a thing, and it's been 10 years and we've never seen a Hive War Moon in-game, and since Siva is going to be making her way into the story soon, it feels like a great idea to make that the setting for a new expansion. Kind of like stepping foot on the War World or on Apocalypse from, DC Comics. It'd be freaking awesome. So it'd be freaking awesome to just have a Hive War Moon looming over us in the solar system. It'd be a great way to kick off Destiny 3 or any new expansion, really. But those are the powers I was able to list off. If there are more possible subclasses, I counted 6 powers. So some of these may or may not be the same part of the same power set. However, it does seem like they could all be their own thing, despite how linked they are. It seems like there's only 4 light abilities. Arc, Solar, Void. We all know those. And the 4th one just being pure light. There aren't many times we get to see pure light being used, but notable moments in which we see it are Gull's death, the Traveler's Restoration, the Traveler's Terraforming Beam in Lightfall, and, the 12 Guardian Kamehameha in Excision. I can't count more than 4 for the possible light subclasses, because I just haven't been able to find anything. I've been looking around for a while, and I haven't been able to find any new light powers. But correct me if I'm wrong, please do. I'll make an addendum about it. But otherwise, if all these powers are eventually added, we could have more darkness powers than light, and that puts us in a really interesting position in terms of cosmic balance inside of Destiny's universe. Bungie has a lot of options if they're working on one final subclass for Destiny 2. I assume if D3 is a thing, they could just leave it for then. But if we do use the subclass inversion theory, Nightmares might be up next. Since Strand is like an inverted Void, Stasis is like an inverted Solar, so maybe Nightmares are an inverted Arc subclass. I'm not really the first to propose this theory. I think this is just a naturally occurring thought in most people's mind, because if you just look at it, just look at an HSL wheel and it makes sense. you know, it's right there in front of us. But until then, we just have no idea what they could be working on. Even though they have been teasing more powers after cracking the game wide open. But yeah, really excited to see where they go with this. But thanks for watching. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for. All right, this is gonna be a little controversial, but I think Siva could be a subclass, but not without jumping a massive shark. This has been something that tons of people have thought about. A lot of debate of whether it's possible since it's not a paracausal power. And in my last video, some people even commented about how they wanted a Siva subclass. And you know, I do too. So I'm going to give my opinion on it. Talk about some of that lore. And a bit of the history of Siva. So, Siva comes up a lot when we talk about the splicers. And we haven't seen a max power splicer yet. Axis was not a max power splicer. You know? That priest in the raid is not a max power splicer. The way the splicers are described to be weavers of reality and Siva being a constructive and self-replicating force, it's clear that they share common ground. The attraction the Elixni have towards the nanites is really natural given their history. The splicers worship machines, their idols, their gods. It's what the Elixni culture was built around. The splicers in the Peak of Reese could do so many amazing things. They would weave tapestries like Mithrax described in Final Shape, and so many other things that were lost in the whirlwind after the fall of Reese. But it's not the main topic of the video. I'm just, you know, just a little bit of background for when we get into it. Before I get any further, I gotta address the elephant in the room. Bungie is not gonna go back to Siva anytime soon. They let us have Outbreak perfected because it's a cool exotic. And it was a great excuse to take us to the original tower again for a special mission. There's just too much work to be done to bring back something like that. And if we just think about like the reprise raids, there's too much work. There's too much work to do that as well. Because like Wrath of the Machine, it's like, I think if any reprise raids are gonna come back this year, it's probably gonna be either a Leviathan raid, but most likely Scourge of the Past. Batsa District has come back 2 years in a row. That's where the Elixni of the city live. And we saw the Scourge guys in the co-op focus missions. So it's obvious if any raid is going to come back, it's going to be that one. I don't know where it fits into this year's seasonal... I'm sorry. I meant to say episodic structure, because it's so different. But there is an Elixni Scorn season coming soon. So if there's any time to put it in, it would be then. Because if you look back, Bungie always follows the theme of a season. We got Kingsfall during Season of the Plunder. We got Crota's End back in Season of the Witch. Vogue came back during Season of the Splicer. That was a pretty good place to do it. No way is Wrath of the Machine coming back. Because I know you and me do not want to see House Dusk or Salvation Forces in Wrath. You do not want that. I know you don't. So let's just bury it, because they aren't bringing it back. The amount of assets they'll have to make to get Wrath in D2, it's just too much. Like, I'm talking about a game development perspective here, okay? They have to make new models for each Elixni class. Like, and come on. If they're gonna revisit an old raid, they're gonna add new stuff, just like Vogue. We have Wyverns now and stuff like that. Don't you want to see a Siva Brig or a Siva Heavy Shank? That's totally something they could do. Like a perfected Brig and a perfected Heavy Shank? Perfected Saber or something? Because they'd have to make the Splicer Drag, the Splicer Vandal, Splicer Captain, the Servitors, the Shanks, and each boss type. Because they didn't even make those for Season of the Haunted. Not one of those guys are in Season of the Haunted. Like, Taniks came back as Taniks, not perfected Taniks. And when they brought back Devil's Lair, they just made normal Sepiks. They didn't make Sepiks perfected. Like, is that canon? Is that a point in time strike? Or is that like the the disgrace strike, because like the disgrace strike takes place after Crota's end. You know, it's a different wizard. That's not Omnigul, but it's the same strike basically. Narratively different. Do we know if that's just another time that they resurrected Sepix Prime? How many times can they do that? If it's kind of like the ship of Theseus of Destiny, Sepix Prime, where he's like, if you rebuild, if Sepix Prime has been rebuilt this many times, is he still Sepix Prime? You know, because it's a completely new piece. Whatever. This is stupid. Very off topic. Yeah, all the raid bosses, Siva assets, the music too. From a game development perspective, this is just too much work. Especially since most reprised content like King's Fall, Crota's End, and Vogue are just free to play. You don't need the season pass to play those stuff, or to own any expansions from that year. So, there's gotta be a return on investment. We're not gonna see Siva ever again, as much as I want it back. And I really want it back, unless there's some big Siva expansion where they definitely get their money back. I don't think they're gonna do that though. I'm just saying. Look, I'm gonna talk about this later in the video, but they got the building blocks to do it. There's a lot of stuff they can do with it. However, what if we did give it back? What if we did get it back? Could the Guardian wield it? Could we have a Siva subclass? So that I say, why not? Why not? I want you to list the reasons why the Guardian couldn't wield Siva. The Devil Splicers could. We're basically honorary splicers now. That buried Iron Lord had light coming out of it. So, like, Siva's able to channel Paracausality. We saw that. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's impossible at all. So, here's a list of reasons why I think it's not impossible to wield Siva. The Splicer's understanding and ability to manipulate technology come from the Traveler. It's not a light power. It's just, that aspect of their culture comes from their time with the Traveler. We hear about it. We had a whole season about it. We know that these Splicers are basically body hackers. Like, they basically reprogram reality in some ways. It's an interesting way of how the Splicers use their connection with the light to do these things. We were able to create Siva because we entered the Golden Age. I know it's not from the Traveler, but both things were because of the Traveler. It was caused by it. We figured it out. We got the tech. We understood. So did the Elixni. It might not be an elemental aspect of the universe, like Arc, Solar, or Void, and it may not link consciousness, like Strand Resonance, Deep Sight, and Nightmares. I don't know. Have we ever considered making a non-elemental subclass? Like, come on, there are abilities that we've used that require devices that channel our light, like the Witch's Staff and the Splicer Gauntlets, the Synaptic Spheres. Basically, what I'm suggesting is that Siva would be, like, kind of crazy to say this, but the first kinetic subclass. Alright? Like, we have light, dark, and kinetic. That's basically what I'm suggesting. That's wacky, it's silly, and basically not exactly important, but it's a gadget. It's always been a device. You don't need to be paracausal to wield Siva or a Splicer Gauntlet. So what was needed was an understanding of the technology, and in the case of the Splicer Gauntlet, an understanding of the light. By the way, I think it's worth asking, now that we're on the topic of splicers and how they can kind of do some interesting things. How did Mithrax hack our cup of coffee? He hacked the Nezarec's remains into a cup of coffee. So clearly splicer technology, as shown in Beyond Light, is able to hack into powers from the darkness. That's how Salvation wielded stasis. They basically made devices to hack their way into having paracausal power. They hacked their way into building structures on Reese. They hacked Siva under their control. They plan to do so again in the Outbreak Perfected quest, because that's what we're stopping there. We're getting Outbreak Perfected to stop them from mastering Siva again, taking Siva, because they never mastered it. Another thing that these splicers could do, they could hack us into the Vex Network and the Cloud Arc. So we have a history of splicers and their feats. We have a history of splicer feats, and we don't exactly know their limits. Where does it end? What is the limit of a splicer gauntlet's abilities? And the Guardians, they share a ton of these abilities. I'm pretty sure we still have the splicer gauntlet on us. That's why we're still able to go in and out of the network, even now in episode echoes. I just think it would make sense. Our own paracausal connections via a splicer gauntlet could allow us to manipulate and use Siva in some way. Same with Quicksilver. I don't think we'll get a Quicksilver subclass. I'm not suggesting that. There's nothing pointing towards that, at least not now. Even though Quicksilver is like a technologically more advanced version of Siva, we got Quicksilver Storm and the Ghost Shell that gives us some insight on how the material works. And that's kind of how Quicksilver is. It's a material, not exactly a weapon. Not in the way that Siva can be used. You can make weapons out of it, you know, like Quicksilver Storm and whatever. But no, we haven't seen a Quicksilver being used to kill directly. Not in the way Siva was used, where, you know, it consumes like organic and inorganic matter to replicate itself. However, Siva's directive, that's mostly because of Rasputin's interference with the mechanics, giving it the directive to eliminate the Iron Lords. It became the destroyer that inspired its namesake. I won't go into the entire story of why Rasputin did this. I'm not making these videos to catch people up. I'm making these videos for the people that actually play and like the narrative and its potential. You know, I'm not here to tell you the entire story of Destiny. You know, there are other channels for that. Honestly, it's Siva just has a lot of narrative potential. If they make a Destiny 3 and move on from 2, like a whole new game, it would be a great excuse to reuse Nessus. The Exodus Black had a Siva cache with it, but it was lost in the wreckage. Maybe the Vex took it and just got rid of it. It is believed that the design was inspired by Vex Radiolaria. To see a possible interaction there between the Vex and the Siva would be interesting. The key difference between Vex Radiolaria and Siva is that Radiolaria is sentient. Those are living creatures, you know? They're like algae, or what's it called? You know, those little things. They're like plankton. But Siva isn't sentient. It's just cycling through its directives over and over and over again. Consume, enhance, replicate, looping for centuries. Since the Siva on board the Exodus Black was dormant, it probably doesn't have such directives. I know I already said I don't think Bungie is ever bringing back Siva, and they said that they're done with it. However, they wouldn't advertise a twist as big as Sabaton getting the light. They wouldn't tell us years prior, hey look, the Hive are gonna get the light soon. Like, imagine if they announced Destiny 2, and they're like, yeah, the Red War is gonna happen, and in a few years, the Hive are gonna have the light. They wouldn't promo that. They wouldn't. So why would they advertise a twist as big as Siva? I know this opinion contradicts what I said earlier. How I don't think Siva will come back, but that's just from a development perspective. You know, it may not be possible right now, but maybe one day when they have the time and the resources to make the assets for it, to justify making that many new 3D models, it would have to be a whole expansion at that point, not just one raid or a season. Obviously that year they would probably make two Siva raids, you know. They would make a new one for that expansion and a reprisal of Wrath of the Machine. But, you know, let's just think it too far ahead. Maybe one day they'll make a Siva expansion to justify making that many new 3D models. My point is, narratively the building blocks are there, but physically it might not be possible. Siva was a significant threat to the solar system. I mean, some of it got out of Russia. A little bit of it. I mean, we got the Tanax Reloaded. There's like a ton of stuff that happened with the Hive there. The way that they were able to control that ogre. By the way, I had to do that strike alone. But yeah, for a multitude of reasons, it's probably not going to come back. But the groundwork for it is there, you know? And the possibility of actually wielding it makes sense. in a way that it doesn't make sense. That's just, it does, but it is. It isn't, but it does. Because, it's weird, though, the way we come up with excuses to get new powers. I'm sure originally they wanted to launch Destiny 1 with all 3 classes having all 3 subclasses, but they probably just left it over for Taken King. The truth is that they were still working on them all. That's a lot of stuff to work on. And, as big as the team is, there's still a lot of stuff to figure out. And trust me, there's stuff that, as much as you want it to work in a game engine, it's probably not always going to work on the first try. It could at least be an aspect in another subclass. What if there was a splicer subclass? We had as an empowered object, we had a Siva chunk that could use the brainwash on certain enemies. That makes sense. Basically get the artifacts from Destiny 1 and just make them aspects for a splicer subclass. So it's not really, I don't think it would be a Siva subclass now that I think about it. I'm going off script now. I don't think it would be a Siva class. It would probably be a splicer subclass, It makes sense, especially if they're getting rid of the class system in Destiny 2 and Destiny 3, I mean. So, that actually is interesting. But like I was saying, like I said before, I was gonna give y'all reasons why I thought it could happen. We're done with that. Now I'm gonna give you a list of reasons why it won't happen. I'm about to give some narrative lore reasons why this won't ever happen. We manipulate energies across the electromagnetic spectrum. Sure. Paracausality is basically saying, I don't give a damn about the laws of the universe. But in Lightfall, Osiris explains the nature and ideologic forms of each usable element in the game. All of them require an understanding and intimate control of the forces we wield. Siva is not understood by anyone in the Guardian ranks. We know it's a machine and is programmable. However, it's rampant and not truly able to be controlled. Even the Devil Splicers struggled in controlling these elements. Perhaps, given time, they would be able to master it, but in truth, there's no telling what would become of it. They could have ended up being completely consumed by Siva because it made them super aggressive. I can come up with insane, convoluted reasons that could get it to work, but really, with some thought on what an elemental power is, truth is we may never see it in-game as a playable power. Perhaps a tool, or maybe a new arsenal of Siva-inspired weapons, but it's clear that it can't be a subclass. It's simply too unruly to control in this era of the universe. It doesn't fit in the story. We just went from preventing the end of everything to now playing with Golden Age tech. That doesn't make, in terms of stakes, that kind of sucks. We just prevented the end of the universe, thus changing the universe as we knew it, and now we're dealing with new type Vex. We're dealing with the Conductor. We're going to be dealing with Scorn zombie vampires, which is insane, and we don't know what's going on in Season of Heresy. We just know that the ship is decaying, and we're probably going to see a big worm's bones. Because that's what the Dreadnought is. Big worm's bones. Big worm with bones. I guess. Do the worms have bones? Do worm gods have bones? I looked that up. Do hive worms have bones? Whatever. Closing thoughts. Lore schmore. Who cares? What this really adds up to is if they can afford to make a new faction of Elixni, we honestly have enough. We have enough. Alright? Because we got Dusk, we got Salvation, we got Spider's Crew, the House of Light, and, if we include the Scorn, we got the Witnesses Scorn, which, I don't know what's going on with them now. We got Xivu Arath Scorn, and we got Fikro Scorn, who are going to be, like I said earlier, vampires. I don't think narratively Siva has a place in Destiny up to this point. It can't come back. There's no space for it, since it would most likely be all about the Devil Slicers again, because why the hell not? Bungie is very much focused on the future in the past. Not every expansion has to be narratively relevant in the grand scheme of things, you know? I know what that sounds like initially. I think if we use every single plot point all the time and everything has to be connected in every episode and every expansion forever and forever, I think the narrative is going to find itself pigeonholed into a place that nobody's going to want it to be in, you know? Because light fall. Anyway, that's about it for this one. I played through all of Rise of Iron to make this video. It's not very long, very short actually. Is it shorter than Crota's End? Not Crota's End. Dark Below. Is it shorter than Dark Below? Is it actually shorter than Dark Below? And what's the other one? House of Wolves. Like, it feels that short. Crazy how they followed up Taken King with that. But yeah, I had to do the Wretched Eye strike solo, which got my heart racing. It's on stream. I'll put the clip here. But if you want to watch the whole video of me doing that solo, it's on the channel right now. But here's an ogre I drew the other night because of that. And if you got an opinion you want to share, go ahead. Would like to hear your thoughts. Could Siva be a subclass? Could it totally never be done? Aside from your own wish list, do you think Bungie will ever come back to the concept? I personally think it's cool as hell. And I would love to see what a non-elemental subclass like a Siva or Splicer subclass could be like. I'm unsure if anyone's given this topic any relevance. Granted, when they revealed Calus's look for Lightfall, my immediate thought was, why does he have so many seals on his head? Granted, his whole outfit is like an overachieving alien Boy Scout. I mean, look at all the badges he's got. But recently, with Lightfall, it made me think about it again. So I want to look at some of the disciples we've seen in the past and what the relevance of their respective seals may mean. If you noticed, they got a ton of these things on their faces. All of these numbers have various meanings and possible implications. I'm only going to focus on the aspects of those numbers that align with the disciples' core beliefs, personality, and or design. First off, we're going to go with Nezarec. Nezarec probably has the most interesting count in his own iconography, given his strange anatomy. He has those huge angel wings, various mixed anatomy due to what is described as chimeric fusion. Among the disciples, Nezarec definitely has some of the most presence in lore and in references. He's got 7 eyes, 5 seals, 12 in total. I'm going to start with the number 7, as it's maybe the most important number in this whole video. Lucky number 7. There are 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 seals of the apocalypse, 7 trumpets, 7 days of creation, the 7 deadly sins. 7 can also symbolize Athena, Minerva, perfection, and completion. And I'll also add to the 7 miracles that Jesus performed in the Bible. However, I don't think that's super relevant to Nezarec, but it is worth noting. 7 colors of the rainbow is definitely very much important to his own design. It helps inform his own design. I mean, look at him. He's got void coming out of the scythe. He's got a red body, multicolored eyes, and his wings are shifting from orange and blue. There's also all the different Shadow Legion, and some of the Tormentors too. They have multiple colors on their body. 7 seals of the apocalypse, also pretty useful information too, because we know that Nezarec is one of the leading disciples from Earth's collapse, a bringer of doom and a final god of pain. So, you know, he was there when the apocalypse happened. You know, he might have, like in the Bible we hear about, and in some other religions we hear about the 7 seals of the apocalypse, and how once they're all broken, that's when the apocalypse starts. Play Darksiders. That's a really good one. This just makes me think about Darksiders. And he also has 5 symbols, as I said earlier. 5 seals. 5 is an interesting one too, because 5 is often associated with human perfection, representing the anatomy, at 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, that's 5. So if we align it with perfection, Nezarec in the raid is kind of like a perfect cell type being, kind of like a Cell Max type of situation, where like he's got light and dark, and he's just bursting with power, and he's like going crazy over it, like, oh, this is amazing. And so that could be a case of his own feeling of perfection as well. Number 5 can also represent freedom and curiosity, as well as change. So as we can see in the raid once again, we can see that he's sort of, he breaks through, he's free, right? He's finally getting out there, and he's going through a metaphysical change, both spiritually and physically. It aligns with that choice of the number 5. And in the Lightfall campaign, he also expresses curiosity over the Neomuni, as well as you when you're in both the Hypernet Current Strike and the Thrillodrome Lost Sector. Additionally, the word antidikos, which is written 5 times in the Greek New Testament, can mean adversary, usually in reference to the devil, which is a fitting description to Nezarec. Not only is he a fiend, a final god of pain and suffering, he also has a bit of iconography with his horns, They kind of look like devil horns. Daimon is also referenced 5 times in 5 Greek New Testament verses, including the Book of Revelations, referring to evil spirits. And finally, 12. 12 can represent the power of authority of God. Jesus also had 12 disciples, which, going back to the other video I made, how many disciples are there? Are there just 6 or 12? It's kind of interesting how, like, Rolk dies, he has 8 seals, and then Callus comes in a year later, and he gets 8 seals. So, did he take Rolk's place? Is he his number 8? Like, it's worth noting. It's worth thinking about it. So we don't know what order or how many disciples the Witness has conscripted in its crusade against the Traveler. It is an interesting coincidence that the presence of that number, as well as the 12 minor prophets in Scripture, which isn't super relevant. However, attached to Nezarec's sin, we do have an in-game prophecy of Nezarec's return. So the number 12 could also be a reference to prophets. There are also connections to magical symbolism, presenting perfection and cosmic order, which totally makes sense. He's currently in a body of conflict between dark and light, and he's just like a beast at that moment in a new position in the cosmic hierarchy. There are also 12 zodiac signs. While this doesn't connect Nezarec to any one of those signs, I do think it is worth noting. Continuing with Callus, we can see he has 8 seals on his head. This can signify many things. The number 8. I could share the significance from Pythagorean numerology, where the number represents prosperity and victory, which very much fits Callus's motif, growing fat from strength, being dripped out and all his wealth and stuff like that. An extremely prosperous emperor that in the end does lead the Witness to victory in Lightfall. He might have died before they won, but he still had the path open for them. The number 8 is also associated with power, strength, discipline, money, and abundance. as well as longevity and hard work, and biblically aligned with resurrection, which is parallel to Callus's rebirth as a disciple. Now, just as I did with Nezarec, I'll count his eyes, taking the total symbol count to 10, which is associated with perfection, creation, and manifestation. Awakening that can lead to understandings of life's purpose and destiny. Callus's arc across Destiny 2 has always been associated with his own personal awakening and rebirth, as well as a search for purpose and belonging. That was one thing that the Black Fleet gave to him when he was at the lowest point of his life, while in exile after the Midnight Coup. This takes us to the Season of the Haunted, as well as the exotic mission for a Dead Man's Tale, Those are my ideas of what Callus's iconography could symbolize, as we've seen him go through much change and in search of purpose throughout his whole art. Before we move on, the number 10 is also referenced in Revelations when the beast is revealed, each representing a king that has not received their land, which could also serve as a parallel to Callus. Not only does he have all those big horns on his armor as a disciple, but because he's also a king, you know? He hasn't really received what he's expecting, so it could reflect that biblical meaning as, you know, Revelations is an apocalyptic chapter, and the whole motif around the Black Fleet and the Witness is bringing about the end of all things. Now to Rolk. I had to open up Blender to count this one, because I couldn't find any good pictures that you could clearly see them. And as you can see down here, he has 8 seals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he also shares the meaning of the number 8. That makes sense, given Rolk is the subjugator of the Witness, the first disciple, and with that comes discipline, power, strength, ambition. I'd also like to point out that Rolk's 8 seals on his face can also be referenced to his rebirth as a disciple, as in the lore we see him as a once great warrior of Lubre, transforming him and his weapon into Lubre's ruin. But he also has the same number of seals as Callus, which also fits Rolk's purpose as a disciple, a symbol of strength, power, and longevity. However, adding his 6 eyes to the count, that brings our total to 14 symbols on his head. So, and 14 is specifically important in the Bible. Being a multiple of 7, it can be a symbol of spiritual perfection, and most importantly, salvation, which not only aligns with Rolk as the Witness's first disciple, but as well as the entire Black Fleet and the Witness. There's a number of times 14 is referenced in the Bible. I'm going to be talking about the Bible a lot with Rolk, because it's kind of like thematically appropriate for the character. Apostle Paul also has 14 epistles. There are also 14 books in the deuterocanonical books that are the Apocrypha. 14 can also be associated with balance, trust, and harmony, as well as self-worth and trust in one's own ability. Something that I don't think totally aligns with Rolk. However, Rolk definitely has a certain swagger and blatant confidence in himself throughout Vow of the Disciple before being humbled by the raid team. But it does lend to his more adaptable nature and independence in battle and lore. And I'll add this about Rolk too. He also has 6 eyes, and if you take a cursory glance at the Bible, you know that the mark of the beast is 666. Rolk is not only a beast, but a powerhouse who is known for delivering civilizations to their end. Also, I just want to point out the Akuma reference in his concept art. Like, this dude is a beast. You know? His final stand is like him entering his Satsu no Hado. As you can see, there might be even more nuance into these designs than you might have originally thought. There's so many things in media that makes it worth dissecting. To me, this is what helps make Destiny as interesting as it is. having all these unique perspectives from religion, mythology, cosmology, and even astrology. And not to engagement farm or anything, but I am curious to hear if anyone can point out some other meanings I might have missed of these numbers. I can't cover them all because it's already pretty long video, but it is what I think an interesting topic, and these numbers don't really have any confirmation in lore or in game about what they could mean and what they represent. But I mean, none that I can find anyway. But it is an interesting topic that I'm surprised I haven't seen many people talk about. Well, any people talk about, because it's like I've seen people talk about the symbols in Rogue's Eyes, which are definitely relevant, and we see some of the Shadow Legion have them too, but it is interesting to see how these might be connected to different types of religions and different types of beliefs, and it just goes to show that if you want to make something truly crazy like that, you kind of have to take a bit from everyone, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
What do you want from me?
You want the numbers, Mason. That's all we've ever wanted.
Okay, so I wrote this at 1:30 a.m. according to my notes. So if this is a little disjointed, I'm hoping to flesh it out as I read it. So right now you're getting raw 1:30 a.m. me, but passed through a woken filter. If you believe your weapon wants to end all of existence, then so it will. Tolan the Shattered. Bad Juju is one of my favorite weapons of all time in Destiny, and the flavor text that accompanies it explains what it means to be paracausal. We have all heard of the I think, therefore I am. I mean, specifically with Ergo Sum, a lot of people have been made aware of that phrase in Destiny, but this doesn't have to do anything with Ergo Sum. I'm just drawing a comparison of the phrase. Out in our everyday, we think, therefore we are, but having command over paracausal power is more like, I think, therefore you are. Therefore this is. Like when you pull out a golden gun, you are believing, I have a gun, Or like the Dawn Blade, it's like you pull it out and it's like, that is a manifestation of your will, of your mind, brought to physical space with the light. Take the 9 for example. The 9, their existence is tied to our perception. At least that's a theory, right? We think, therefore they are. The life in our solar system is what gives the 9 their existence, right? Because we perceive that there is something more, something out there, we are giving them not form, but idea, because the 9 are antimatter. They're not physical, right? And Gaia forms, they're Gaia forms. That's what they're theorized to be in the Antaeus Ward's lore tab. Their existence is tied to our thought, much like the in-game mechanics of Final Shape, where in the campaign we imagine a path with the dark, right? Using the power of our mind. And then it is made physical with the light. The Light versus Dark saga had always been a conflict of form versus formless. The Traveler, who was a solid mass floating in the city, versus the Black Heart, which was formless and, shifting. And the 9 seek a way to become more real, independent from us, so that if we ever become extinct, they may live on. Yet, creatures such as Nezarec have been able to exploit these paracausal mechanics, making sure that even in death, they'll be able to live on. Whether it is in the back of our minds, in our hearts, in his grave through the usage of his limbs to empower individuals. And now he's coming back through Mithrax, and we're not sure where this story is going to lead, because Nezarec seems to have a lot of paths laid out for his return. It could be tied to Scions, it could be tied to Mithrax. Who knows? Maybe there's something on the Dreadnought that we might see that connects to him again. Maybe in Apollo there'll be some sort of connection to him too. Because, you know, if you look at that concept art, kind of looks like a cultist thing, and we know that the cult of Nezarec is a thing, right? And if you watched my Mask of the Quiet One video, sorry for plugging, but, you know, actually do go watch it. I talk about Satomi, what role Satomi could be playing within all this. Through our emotions and thoughts, Nezarec clings to existence, while Rulk, dominated by force and vicious subjugation, Nezarec influenced and controlled minds by instilling fear. Ever since Witch Queen, we've been toying with deep sight, where we are able to recall the shape of what the world was, to sort of bend our space into manifestations. In Witch Queen, it was temporary, but as I mentioned earlier, in Final Shape, we find ways to make it sort of permanent, because, you know, they're made physical with both light and dark. We're able to manifest psychic impressions created by intense emotions via this method. You know, impressions that linger on, left behind by conscious thought. The power of Nezarec, of the nightmares, comes from our fear, our enemies' fear. And through that fear, impressions of enemies and nightmares are made manifest. Trauma and obstacles and weapons, they're able to come back. Nightmares that even after so many years still haunt the moon, the derelict Leviathan, the terraformed pyramid ship, as well as distant corners of the solar system. No darkness power has been able to be this absolute across the solar system, and I believe that's because it's the one power that can be like networked in fear, you know? It's compounding. So many people are already afraid of Nezarec. You know, the Neomuni were made aware of them, the Earthlings were made aware of them, the Hive, Elixni, you know, the Scions. It's been around for millennia, not just in our system, but in their systems, affecting them. Nezarec's been playing the long game. You know? He achieved what Oryx wanted, to become synonymous with the universe, to become axiomatic, which, you know, that might be something we could be hearing next season. The power to live on through death. Are they going to see that as heresy, as a heretic? You know, we know it's going to be Xivu or Wrath related, and we might see Savathun, because it's like, you know, come on, it's going to change the whole Hive pantheon. But I'm interested if Oryx is going to come back in this wake too. I keep on talking about death and resurrection, but like, you know, like we just got Skolas back. And Nezarec, he's always going to come back. The power of the mind is so absolute that even the Ahamkara were able to twist desire, to speak with the Anthem Anathemy, to impose will onto reality. It's most interesting that the Ahamkara are so powerful. They fell at the hands of guardians, and a lot of people don't seem to realize this, but the Great Hunt was truly a spiritual battle. You know, a battle between minds and hearts, between the guardians and the Ahamkara. Would absolute will be the dominator? Or would unhinged desire be what eventually wins the day? You know, and for many cases, desire would win, and it would lead to the demise of many. As we know by the result of the Great Hunt, that determination of will is what won the day. Of course, you know that there are no longer any living Ahamkara, none that have hatched from their eggs, none that we know of. But again, to my point, the real battle of the Great Hunt were fought in the mind, ensuring that the Ahamkara wasn't able to grasp onto your desire. Like, the most effort the Guardians had to do in that fight, right? The greatest battle of that fight was not actually killing the Ahamkara, making sure that the Ahamkara wouldn't be able to grasp onto your desires, you know? To gain power and sustenance from that wish, and becoming even harder to exterminate. You never know what's gonna be the twist that they put when they grant a wish. So you had to be really careful. Like Saladin, he had that one thing on his mind. He faced the Ahamkara and they were like, oh yeah, I'll grant you a wish, right? And he says, well, I want to fight a dragon. I want to kill a dragon. And so he did, and his prey fell. There are some theories about this fight, implying that maybe that's why the Iron Lords fell. Because Saladin wanted to kill the dragon, and he holds the belief that, you know, we are what we overcome, right? So, like, he is a dragon in that case. So, technically, the Iron Lords shared the same fate. I honestly think that's, like, too much of a of a crazy theory to put in this video right now, so I'm not going to explore that. But my point is, this is a battle won within the mind of Lord Saladin. Outside of the Ahamkara, there are the Worm Gods, you know, seemingly a relative in the evolutionary line of the Ahamkara, who are able to influence and control through suggestion and enticing of power. Saladin's worm, who fed on lies and deceit and the complexities of confusion like the Ambaru engine. It's an interesting twist of the power of the mind within Destiny's narrative. There's also the cases of the Hive siblings who were summoned to life once again by bearing tribute to the aspects of which they drew power from. You know, and it's all once again something caused within the mind. For Savathun, a great act of trickery was caused, and for Xivu, a great act of war. And from their memories, they were returned. The mind has so many interesting applications and paths to power that are mostly uncharted in Destiny's universe. And with the exploration of the Veil being some sort of soul server or something that connects all people's minds and stuff, and somehow even has paths into the Vex network, you know, it makes it more clear that the absolute power of the universe is the mind. I mean, the Veil networked those the Witness's people into one form to create the Witness. It's clear that the mind is what is truly the dominant power of Destiny's universe. It gives lives to antimatter, and it builds and reveals paths, it haunts, it grants peace. A single thought can alter the history of an entire universe, and perception and desire can destroy anything in its way. The Pale Garden gained form because we envisioned it, because we entered it. You know, our mind created the structures that are there. It responded to our mind and our intention, changed and contorted. And it was our will that eventually defeated the Witness. A collective of peoples from the Elixni, the Cabal, Awoken and Hive, and even humanity, focused on one desire. The desire to end the Witness. And it presents an idea that so many refuse to take in their personal lives. And that is, you are the master of your universe. You may achieve anything that you set your mind to, and no matter who pushes back or what obstacles get in your way, you decide what becomes of your life. If you so desire to change the world, then you will, and that is your power, not just in Destiny, but in your actual life. I feel like this video is a lot more of a loose connection of ideas banded together to prove that there's only one power that is supreme in Destiny. But I really do think it presents Destiny's core values in a really great way. In the end, the Guardians make their own fate.
I'm here. I'm back.
Look wheels you.
Let them go.
Father wheels you. Give him back.
Don't!
Hear me, Father wheels you.
This is gonna sound terrible because I'm recording it on my laptop's microphone. But yeah, this is a little compilation. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. That means a lot to me. It's a pretty long video, an hour and 50 minutes. and at least I think it is an hour. I mean, it's whatever, doesn't matter. Thanks for watching, and if you liked it, make sure to subscribe, please. That means a lot to me too, and it'll definitely make my day. We're so close to 300. I really want to get to 500. I want to see what happens. And you know, please leave your thoughts in the comments. This is a compilation of a ton of darkness and universal level things that I've been thinking about in Destiny for the past few months. So I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it and leave a comment. So if you want to like the video, go ahead and do that. But yeah, thanks a bunch, and have a great day.
Hello, Guardian. Hello.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi?